Lawyers of Reddit, what's the stupidest case you've been asked to take on, and did you? My father is a patent attorney, and when I was around 14 he told me about a guy who wanted to patent the iPhone 3 because aliens had given him the design for it. My father told him that if the aliens originally designed then they were the ones that had to patent it, not him. I'm a prosecutor, so I don't get hired to represent anyone. I work for the government, but I do have discretion over how the prosecution progresses, i.e. deciding to proceed, deciding what to offer in the event of a plea bargain, deciding to withdraw the charges, etc. I had a case a few months ago where a man was charged with shoplifting. Turned out he was 70 years old, had absolutely no criminal record, and had shoplifted a sandwich which he ate politely in the store. He honestly thought he had paid for it. I was so angry that he was ever charged in the first place. When I saw him in court, he was absolutely terrified. I withdrew the charges and wished him well. I have no idea how it progressed that far. Something kind of similar happened to my late uncle. He was in his late 70s and loved going to the grocery store and just buying a ton of random new foods to cook. One day he was accused of putting a pickle in his pocket and trying to walk out with it. They actually had loss prevention deal with him and empty his pockets and stuff. He didn't steal a pickle. I can just imagine how frightened he was when he saw security talking to him. I had a client come in saying that he needed to sue Stu for robbing all his checks. When I asked him if Stu had a last name, he said no. When I asked him if he knew any Stu, he said no. When I asked him what proof he had that Stu was robbing him, he showed me all of his pay stubs. There were clear monthly deductions by Stu. As soon as I saw it, I knew. I asked, do you have children? He said yes. I then told him your Stu is the SCU, the support collection unit. They take money out of your check to pay for your child. He left the office insisting that we needed to find Stu. I did insurance defense for a long time, including insurance fraud investigations for insurance companies. You wouldn't believe how many people take a video inventory of their house, only to have it mysteriously burn down the next day. You really can't fix stupid. Woman wanted me to sue McDonald's because their employees beat up her son, who was trying to rob the place. Reminds me of the Legal Advice thread where a parent was asking about suing a girl who had punched her son and broke his nose. But looking through the poster's history, it was clear that the son had been punched while attempting to sexually assault the girl. When I was in law school I did the criminal defense clinic where we help a public defender. I say help because they just give you small cases to do by yourself. I had a guy accused of shoplifting a yellow Fubu shirt. Guess what he wore to the trial? A GD yellow Fubu shirt. I asked the prosecutor to reoffer the plea deal. She did, and I convinced the guy to take community service and probation. If I remember correctly, our public defender system is tragically overworked and underfunded. Probably too late here, but I was a civil rights investigator. We had one guy complain that he was fired from his factory job because of his race. He was black. Owner of the factory said it was because the guy was smoking crack on his lunch break. Turns out he was smoking crack on his lunch break, but so were a few of his white co-workers and they were not fired. The owner agreed to pay the guy 6 months of back pay and give him a neutral reference. I was working in a law firm and got a call from reception advising that someone had arrived needing some intellectual property advice. I arrived at reception to find a clearly disturbed woman with a persistent facial twitch and a small wheeled suitcase. I took her to a conference room to discuss, making sure I kept a good line of sight to reception. She put the suitcase on the table and opened it to reveal a stack of thousands of handwritten pages and one half of a pair of scissors. So I guess a scissor? She explained that she had written a manuscript about how the city council gave her schizophrenia and hepatitis, aliens stole her pets, and that it was all part of a bigger conspiracy involving the army and the Illuminati. She was worried that our local newspaper was going to steal her thoughts and publish her manuscript without her consent, and wanted to register the copyright in her manuscript. We then had a perfectly rational and reasonable discussion about copyright laws. I explained that in our jurisdiction she didn't need to register it, and that she had rights as an author automatically on creation of the work. I told her the most useful thing she could do is ensure she had evidence of her creative work, and that she should send a digital copy to herself and a friend, and also leave a copy with a friend. That way if it was published without her consent she could prove it was her work. We spoke for nearly an hour, she thanked me and then left. She got free legal advice, and I didn't get stabbed with a scissor. I hope she found the help she needs. Edit. Assumed this would get buried. I was a junior and just tried to treat the client with respect and empathy. Scissor gave me pause, but never felt in danger. Was relieved she had a real legal question and we focused on that, rather than her delusions, and in that sense it wasn't a stupid case. I will say this, as a society, we don't do enough to look after our most vulnerable people, including those with serious mental health issues. Edit 2. Thanks for my first gold, kind stranger. A lady in prison in my state tried to sue the State Department of Corrections for holding her against her will. Her lawyer wouldn't touch it. I had a teacher that worked for a major video game publisher, one of the top 10 ones. He told me that when people tried to sue them for small amounts due to some game being bad, they would just pay whatever the person wanted. It was cheaper than dealing with the country's terrible justice system. Except one day a guy sued them because a game was bad. He was a law student, self-representing, and tried to throw the book at the company. They decided to make an exception for this guy. They instead threw the book back at him. The lawsuit kept escalating until both sides wasted lots of time and money. Then as final stroke, they offered to settle in front of a judge. They're in front of the judge. They put the price of the game on the table in cash and told the guy to just take it and stop bothering them. The judge thought it was very fair and told the guy that if he refused that settlement he would be fined. Guy was very unhappy. He expended like $5,000 in bureaucracy and airplane fares to get $60. I'm a lawyer, but this happened to a friend of mine. He got engaged, and apparently this pissed off his ex-GF. The ex-GF sued him for custody of their 2 cats and $500,000 for something like the lost value of the cats, because she claimed they were service animals. Hint, they were not at all service animals. Edit. Wow, this got a lot of attention. So, to add to the story, one of the reasons my friend broke up with the ex-GF was because she had problems caring for the cats, ignoring them, forgetting to feed them while my friend was away, etc. So her coming back for the cats was clearly all about the fact that my friend was suddenly engaged to someone else. When they went to court, the judge immediately threw out the $500,000 demand because it was ridiculous. Unfortunately, they were awarded joint custody of the cats, which was this woman's way of staying in my friend's life. So he decided it was better if he just gave her the cats so he could be free of her. My aunt and uncle got divorced, and it was really quite civil and polite. They were, and are, still friends, so it was all very clean as divorces go. The odd bit was the cat custody stipulations. Both huge cat people, and they had 2 beloved felines. They went to live with my uncle, but full visitation rights for my aunt. This was not because of any trouble between them, it was my aunt wanting to ensure that any future notional partner my uncle got would not be able to stop cat visits if so inclined. Guy I know worked for the DPP and told me about a case where a guy was up on car theft charges, which is like 5 years maximum, but he was very likely to get a suspended sentence of probation as it was a first ever offense. The dumbass though thought it would be a good idea to go and intimidate the witness into not testifying. The witness called the cops and had CCTV footage of this, so he copped an extra charge with a 20-year maximum, and there was no way in hell he was getting a suspended sentence or probation on that one. Not a lawyer yet, but this happened while I was doing my 1L summer internship. I worked at a law library in a county lockup. There were plenty of interesting stories. One I already posted, but I figured I would share another. I also have no privilege issues. An inmate was charged with felon in possession and was coming down almost weekly to do research. He was basically looking for a way to get rid of a warrant receipt and video, which indicated that he had purchased a box of bullets, giving officers cause to search and find the weapon. One day, he brings in one of the law books he purchased and had reviewed. He pointed to the section that discussed reasonable expectation of privacy and argued that the officers had not asked his permission to view the video and thus had invaded his privacy. I pointed to parts of the book that explained reasonable expectations, still wasn't getting it. Finally, I asked him who owned the video. Walmart. Then wouldn't it be their decision? But it's me in the video. Whose video is it? Rinse and repeat for about 5 minutes before he finally huffed off. Client wanted to sue because there were no strawberries in her fruit salad which she bought from a supermarket. Thankfully a secretary was able to screen the call. She asked if the package said it had strawberries, and the response was, no, but I thought it would have. I don't know how these people manage to make it through life. I don't know how these people manage to make it through life. Sometimes they win cases like this. That gives them capital and confidence to do it again. That is how they make it through. It's like those overly obnoxious customers who yell and scream to get free stuff. They do it because it occasionally works, and they have no shame. Without going into too many details, had a guy that wanted to bring a class action against the company that made his underwear because he was convinced his underwear was the reason he had a crooked deck. He assured us that, as soon as the jury saw his deck, they'd side with him. No, we didn't take it. I worked as a receptionist at a small personal injury firm, and was the first line of defense against the more outlandish cases. One of the most ridiculous calls I took involved a woman wanting to sue her cat's veterinarian for malpractice because her cat scratched her, which in turn supposedly caused her liver to fail, and a slew of other health problems to arise. She believed the vet was at fault because she was convinced the cat was carrying some obscure disease and the vet had failed to catch it. It was my second day on the job, so I put her through to an attorney, not yet knowing what else to do with such a ridiculous situation. She got a firm sorry, can't help ya from our office, in part because we did not do malpractice, veterinary or otherwise, but also because she sounded like a one-way ticket to crazy town. Edit, as some have pointed out, the woman may have actually had cat scratch fever, which could in theory lead to a legitimate claim. However, when she called, she presented it as I got sick, and then someone told me it was from my cat. My vet never told me my cat was sick. Can I sue him for malpractice? And apparently vets do not regularly test for cat scratch fever unless you bring your cat in for certain symptoms. This was clearly an I see a chance for a cash payout situation, and we would get calls like that all the time with both bizarre and banal stories behind them. Either way, she would have needed someone more specialized than the firm I worked for, which primarily handled car accidents and zero cats. I'm a personal injury lawyer in the UK. I took a call from a potential client that had fallen down the stairs in her own home. She had tripped over her own cat. She told me that she wanted to sue her local authority as her home was owned by the council, and she was not allowed to keep pets as part of her lease. She claimed that, when the house was inspected, she was not told to get rid of the cat. It was therefore the council's fault that she fell down the stairs. We didn't take the case on. Edit, formatting and some tidying up. My mother said that at a law firm she used to work at many years ago, they had received a call from a gentleman that wanted to file a lawsuit against Walt Disney. When asked why he was filing suit, he claimed that the Disney characters were coming out of the TV and stealing food from his refrigerator. They told him they'd take the case for an advance fee of $100,000 and never heard back from him. A guy found a rock in the middle of Melbourne CBD that he believed came from an underground volcano, therefore he discovered the volcano and he owned the volcano, and that the Melbourne City Council and indeed the Victorian government should pay him rent to live on top of his underground volcano. No, I did not take on the case. I'm an immigration, so most of my stupid cases involve people trying to con the system or forgot to tell a smarty real information. One lady stood out, though. She was referred to us as a pro bono case. She was filing for asylum based on the fact that she's a Chinese national and she's also a devout Christian. If she was sent back, she would be persecuted based on religious reasons. So nothing weird up to this point. She provided me with statements about how she and her family were harassed by the local police and how certain members of her congregation were arrested. So I'm looking at the statements and the names and places sound familiar. Sure enough, a quick googling showed this was one of the board stories. Essentially what happens is there are people on the internet that sells these packages of fake documents and stories for a successful asylum case. From what I've heard, it usually is a real case that was successful, and someone got a hold of the supporting documents and started mass producing them and selling them. I'm guessing you're supposed to change the names from the original, but this lady didn't. Another red flag was the fact that in her supporting documents, the witnesses kept referring to her in the male form. At first I thought the English translation had typos, but yeah, same thing in the original Chinese ones. I always thought it was more of an urban legend amongst immigration lawyers. Needless to say, I did not take her case. I never did much criminal defense, but a man, who we'll call Dennis, came into my office with a driving while intoxicated charge and an aggravated unlicensed operation of motor vehicle charge, both misdemeanors. Dennis swore up, down, and sideways at 1. He does not drink and was not intoxicated. 2. He never drove the vehicle. And 3. That he has a valid driver's license. I give Dennis the names of some local criminal defense and attorneys and suggest he try them out. Dennis refuses, saying I'm the lawyer he wants. In hindsight, I should have realized that he probably had already gone to these other attorneys and only came to me after they refused to take his case. I charge the guy $200 for an intake and record review fee and contact the local court, police station, and district attorney's office for information and paperwork. I find out that not only did this guy blow a 18 on the breathalyzer, but the cops did a blood test on him after he kept insisting he wasn't drunk. The blood test came back with a 22 back. As for driving, the separate squad cars witnessed Dennis's vehicle run over a mailbox and drive off. He was followed and pulled over on the block. Per the police report, Dennis was the only person in the car and was in the driver's seat with a seatbelt on. Oh, and I tracked down his license through the DMV, and it had expired 3 years ago and was suspended for 2 years prior to that. I called Dennis back into my office and told him he did not have a case that should be taken to trial. Dennis admitted that he probably had been drunk, but he wasn't aware he had been drinking. His son must have put Fireball whiskey in his green tea and he didn't realize there was whiskey in his green tea because he was eating red hot cinnamon candies and had a cold stuffy nose. Anyways, Dennis retained me, but only after I put a clause in his engagement agreement stating I explained his low chance at trial and he understood there was no guarantee of a win. I take the case to trial and, of course, we lose. I was hoping to convince Dennis to take one of the plea offers given to us in advance, but absolutely not. Dennis was sure the judge would understand. Dennis wanted a bench trial, not a jury trial. I made him sign another document later on that said he understood the difference between a bench and jury trial, and he was opting for the bench trial, and he would be found not guilty and everyone would move on. He was sorely disappointed, but only got probation after trial. I think the judge was taking pity on me more than Dennis. Dennis later sued me for his retainer because I didn't adequately defend him. As proof of my inadequate representation, he offered the judge's verdict rendering him guilty. The case was thrown out quickly,